President Trump spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and other European leaders today. They are all in Berlin. This comes ahead of Friday's meeting with President Putin in Alaska. Scripps News international correspondent Trent Murray is live in Berlin for us now. And Trent, this meeting just wrapped up less than an hour ago or so. So what did we learn?
Yeah, that's right, Holly. That call hosted by the German Chancellor with President Zelenskyy in the room, wrapping up, as you say, in the past hour or so. Now, this was a really important call for the Europeans. They've been wanting to try and speak to the White House directly to try and game plan together ahead of President Trump's sit-down with President Putin in Alaska. Now, we know, of course, for President Zelenskyy, he has been very cautious on some of the proposals being thrown out there by the White House and those within the sort of White House's orbit, including the idea of handing over territory to President Putin as part of any sort of peace deal. Now, what we are just hearing in the past 30 minutes or so from the press conference hosted by the Chancellor and President Zelenskyy is that it was a very good call, in their words. The Chancellor said that President Trump can expect Europe's full support as he goes into that sit-down in Anchorage. He also said that, though, for the Europeans, a ceasefire has to be the beginning of any sort of further elements that are discussed. Now, we knew that that was a red line for the Europeans. They are expecting that President Putin might try and drag President Trump along with very detailed plans about what might take place in the long term. The Europeans are effectively saying, stand tough against that and call for an immediate ceasefire, and only then can we discuss the longer term plans for Ukraine. We did also hear from President Zelenskyy. He said he has warned President Trump that President Putin is known to try and bluff his way through, to buy more time and to be prepared for that. We have heard from the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen. She said a very good call, and we have promised to stay in touch. I thought very interesting statement as well from the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. He has said in the past 10 minutes, Holly, that President Trump has NATO's full support, but the ball is now entirely in President Putin's court.
And do we know if there's any plans for any meetings after President Trump and President Putin meet, that they will regroup to see what comes out of this, or is it just sort of a wait and see?
Look, I think undoubtedly those European leaders will be quick on the telephone as soon as that meeting takes place in Alaska. But what President Zelenskyy is saying is that he would like to see another meeting take place. In many ways, he's getting ahead of himself because we need to get through this first one. But he has said today he would like a second meeting, one where he is invited to. He says that Ukraine needs to have a seat at the table, that decisions about Ukraine can't be made without his and the Ukrainian perspective at the table. So that is certainly the request. I guess in many ways the White House has already shown in the past that it is willing to sit down with President Zelenskyy. President Putin, on the other hand, may be a tougher bargain, but certainly right now what the Ukrainians are calling for is not just a seat at the table, but they would also like to see a ceasefire, and if that fails to take place, then they are saying it is time to slap more sanctions on Moscow.
And do we know if the EU leaders are planning to have another meeting post this meeting on Friday in Alaska?
Yeah, we expect that they're going to be on the phone, huddling, if you will, a lot over the coming days. We know that before the call with President Trump today, they already had an internal meeting, the leaders of the big European players, the UK, France, Italy, Poland, and some of those Baltic states as well. Now, we expect those discussions are going to continue to take place because for them, this is really important. They see Ukraine's security as being critical and essential to their security, given that so many of their countries border Ukraine. So they'll want to make sure that what's discussed in Anchorage is something that they are able to live with, if you will, but they also want to make sure that they do have their voice at the table as well. They're acutely aware that they're not getting to sit down with President Putin in Alaska for this summit, but that is why I think this call was so important for them, at least, with President Trump, to convey their message, to convey their concerns, and to make sure he goes into that room fully aware of it, and also fully aware that that Putin himself is quite hostile to a number of them. He often Washington will make threatening rhetoric towards particularly the smaller Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. They are small countries, but they are part of Europe. They are part of NATO. And so there's obviously many pieces on this chessboard right now. It is undoubtedly going to be a critical 48 hours. And certainly the way many Europeans are seeing this is potentially one of the first big geopolitical tests of the Trump second administration, and also a potential moment that could represent a major breakthrough in this war, which of course now has been raging for well over 3 years.
Scripps News international correspondent Trent Murray live in Berlin for us. Thank you so much for that update.